everyone, I'm your midwife, Tanya Tringali. Welcome to the Motherwit Podcast, a show about the issues we healthcare consumers and providers face every day as we interact with the medical system. We'll talk about its blind spots, shortcomings, and share strategies we can use to feel seen and heard, no matter which side of the table we sit on. My guest today is Dr. Christy Lane. She's the co-founder of Flora Fertility, which is what brings her here today. She's a global leader of InsurTech, more on what that means in a bit, and a health scientist with expertise in AI, digital health, and wearable devices. She also founded the Stanford Wearable Health Lab. Dr. Lane has been involved in women's health research since the 90s. She's blazing a path forward to combine critical components of wearable tech that can help to inform insurance policy and make fertility treatments more accessible and affordable. She's a mom of 3 who has gone through IVF herself. Therefore, she deeply understands the emotional and financial challenges of treatment. So she's here today to tell us about Flora, which is a new way to think about insurance and more specifically, insurance for fertility challenges. Because she's an expert in wearables and wearables inform much of her work and is of great interest to me, I had to pick her brain before we wrapped up. I learned a lot from her today. I clarified some assumptions I'd made. I got all jazzed up about the work I'm already doing with women around optimizing fertility and even improving pregnancy outcomes and postpartum experiences. It's work that is inseparable from discussions about lifestyle choices and changes. And ultimately, that's where our discussion landed as we were wrapping up today. I think you'll learn a lot. I think you'll enjoy it. And for many of you, Gen Zers who are listening, this might become an option for you really soon. They are launching this spring, so stay tuned. Christy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion because, we have talked about fertility over the years on this show. And recently we've had a couple of episodes that dive deeper into fertility. And you guys reached out to me because you have a coming soon service or product that's actually really cool. And I think it can serve a lot of people and certainly a lot of my clients. And I want them to know about it. And you also have some really interesting expertise in other areas that I'm interested in. And I'm really looking forward to talking about all of those things with you today. So before we dive in, I want to give you a second to tell us about yourself and a little bit about how Flora came to be. And then we can kind of break it down from there because I think there's almost some lingo that people might need and context as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So for who I am, where I came from, I started out my career as an academic. So I'm a full professor of rehab medicine, but had always been doing in my academic career, had always been doing research in wearable devices, even from the earliest days. So my very first study was in high-risk pregnant women who were bed rested and looking at their physical activity levels using pedometers. And that was in the late 90s. So I'd always been doing wearable and health outcomes research focused on women and older adults. And about 10 years ago, on my first maternity leave, I started my first company, and that was using wearable device information to understand risk of disease and mortality. And that's how I ended up, very long story short, that's how I ended up in insurance. So in InsurTech, working with insurers and reinsurers to better understand risk and price risk. So have spent a long time building predictive models around health outcomes, including fertility. And so how Flora came to be from a personal standpoint for me, I have 3 kids now, but I did go through fertility challenges. So, I was in school forever. And by the time I decided to get married and start having kids, I was in my mid-30s and it just didn't go as expected. I needed treatment for my first 2 daughters. And it was at the time, this is 2013-ish is when I had my first daughter. No one was talking about infertility, right? No one was talking about the financial challenges of it, the emotional isolation challenges, the lack of community. And so for a long time, I had been thinking about, there have to be better solutions for both of those things, building community and also enabling women to be able to afford to start a family. And so about 2 years ago, I was introduced to Laura McDonald, who's my co-founder, and she was thinking about the same problem. She had seen a close family member go through infertility, a cousin, and with her background in, women in finance and looking for solutions in insurance, she was thinking about the same problem. And so we were lucky enough to get introduced and so started building. And in a nutshell, what Flora is, it's fertility insurance. So women who are between 20 and 34 and have no known infertility by a low-cost policy. And then if they end up needing fertility treatment, then we will pay for that.
So you just said something I think is really important. I want to make sure I understood and that our listeners understood. This product is available to people who do not have a known fertility problem. So they have not been diagnosed with anything yet.
Correct.
So that really explains your age range there too, as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, as we know, age is the strongest predictor of infertility. So in our case, you have to be between 20 and 34, but you can use the product until age 44.
Aha, okay.
That being said, a lot of the driving reason behind this type of product is there are quite a number of available financial products like loans and financing for women who know they have infertility and who have decided to go down the journey, in particular around financing IVF. And we wanted to be in more of the true insurance preventative space, building community around women being able to support one another's risk in advance of needing treatment.
And I think that's what I found most interesting about your product was you weren't just, creating a product in which people who already have a known problem or are known to have a higher risk for it, where it wouldn't make sense, I guess, is how it works out. And that's probably why we've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah. I mean, financially, what ends up happening is on the loans and financing side, because IVF in particular is so expensive, the products are very expensive. In many cases, you're ending up paying more for the insurance than the actual treatment itself. But there's that peace of mind around some level of reimbursement. So we really wanted to truly increase accessibility and affordability for women so that they're not paying, thousands and thousands of dollars per year in premiums. And in that case, we're really upstream of that. We're helping women plan and be able to finance the treatment if and when they need it.
And as I understood it from some of the things I was reading, the premiums can be quite low if you enroll at a younger age. Are you able to talk to us a little bit about what a 20-year-old might pay versus a 34-year-old who's enrolling?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean that the underwriting models are, no pun intended, my baby. Building the understanding of how we're pricing this. So a woman who's 20, otherwise healthy, no comorbidities, no known infertility, obviously, could be around $15 a month. And, we used to say the cost of a Netflix subscription, except my Netflix subscription is now, I think, $25 a month. So it's more like, 3 Starbucks lattes per month. As you get older towards, our cap of 34, if you're 34 and you have no known, issues, other comorbid conditions, you could be around that, $30 to $40 a month range, which is still very affordable for someone, that age and likely stage of their life and career. And, there are factors that go into it, including, it's if you have PCOS, for example, lifestyle behaviors, things like if you're a smoker or if you're a heavy drinker, you're sedentary, not active, those also come into the pricing. And so it goes up from there, but still extremely affordable, closer to maybe, $100 a month.
Are you pregnant or a new parent looking to ensure a better postpartum experience? Or are you a birth worker looking to improve your postpartum care skills? Check out Thriving After Birth, an online self-paced course by me, midwife and educator Tanya Tringali. It's 10.5 hours of video content featuring experts in lactation, mental health, pelvic floor health, pediatric sleep issues. You also get worksheets and a workbook, as well as options to have a one-on-one session with me. Sign up at motherwitmaternity.com/thriving, and let's improve postpartum care together. So another thing I think I understand, and I'm certainly looking for you to tell me where I'm veering off path or I've misunderstood. I think you're largely targeting people who are self-employed or work for small or maybe medium-sized companies where they're not able to access another type of coverage that interfaces with fertility care. So I guess I'll start by saying, is that a correct assumption?
Yes and no. So I would say largely yes. Our initial primary market is, Gen Z, gig workers, small to medium businesses, women who do not have access otherwise to employer-based plans. That being said, there are still in the cases where there is coverage. So for example, in the US, there are companies like Carrot and Progeny that are doing large group level coverage for Fortune 500s. And the reason that only Fortune 500s have these plans is the plans are so expensive because there's no underwriting. There's no risk selection. So in order to cover not to get in the weeds, but in order to cover the risk selection piece, the plans need to be expensive. But even if you have a Carrot and a Progeny, there are still limits on the amount that you can spend, the number of, smart cycles in the case of Progeny that are covered. And so we really are there to either be a top up or an additional option. The other piece with big employers is Flora's portable. So, you're working for Microsoft and you have a great Carrot plan and you decide, actually, I want to move careers. I want to leave, you cannot take that coverage with you. Whereas ours is individually owned, Flora policy is, and so you can take it with you wherever you go.
So that kind of spoke to the root of my question. Why I was going for that point of clarification was I was thinking to myself before meeting you today that, okay, well, I love this idea of opening this option to more people because we know that it's very limited who actually have these progenies and whatnots. But I thought to myself, okay, so you've got a young person who maybe is in one of these smaller jobs and then they land some big job and now they have progeny, let's say. So I was trying to figure out what happens there. But you're saying at this point you've paid in for X number of years, you might as well keep this coverage on top of it because progeny is not going to cover everything anyway. And so you end up being that extra layer.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you hit on a key point earlier, which is the way that our pricing is set up incentivizes women to start younger because you're pretty much locked in. You start when you're 20, you're paying a low price. We're only increasing premiums indexed to inflation. So there's no re-underwriting. You're not going to see some huge bump in cost as you age. So the younger you buy, it just makes sense to keep it until you need it or not.
Got it. Okay, I want to back up for 1 second because when you introduced yourself and when I introduced you, we used this word, InsurTech. And I'm pretty clear that my audience is aware of femtech, but I myself, admittedly, hadn't really processed the word InsurTech before. So as I was preparing for talking to you today, I Googled InsurTech, got the definition. I was like, duh, of course that's what it means. And then I Googled examples of InsurTech because I was thinking, well, do I know these companies and just don't know it? And sure enough, that was the case. There were companies listed that I was familiar with, and there were even companies that I had used. So
I love that.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. But I think a lot of people hear this word and for a brief moment, they're not sure what to do with it or what it means. So talk to us a little bit more about this, this new-ish form of tech that gets its own kind of category now.
Yeah, I love that. And I would be curious now to see what the definition is of InsurTech. I'm going to have to do that. In my mind, InsurTech as a term is relatively new, but really what it is technology that enables the insurance value chain. So it could be technology for claims, technology for underwriting, technology, AI-based technology that enables fraud detection. So it really is an encompassing term that traditionally has been applied to lines of business like home insurance, auto insurance, life insurance, disability. It's less of a term, I would say, associated with health insurance. And that's an interesting, maybe another conversation, but usually it's more the tech enablement, things like platforms for claims and tools for brokers and agents. And, you'll see a lot of InsurTech innovation being driven by a group that maybe your listeners aren't familiar with, which are the reinsurance companies. So these are the large companies that insure the insurers, if you will. And interestingly, they're the ones that drive a lot of innovation in InsurTech and investment in these types of companies.
Wow. Well, that's getting deeper than I feel like going, and I'm sure my listeners agree with me.
They're like, boring.
Because, listen, even as a healthcare provider, patients will ask me questions about their insurance, and I feel bad, but I'm like, I'm sorry, you need to go to the front desk and ask that question. Like, I can't see 30 patients a day and know all the things about insurance or each of your insurances. It's not possible.
Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe interesting for your listeners and for you is there is actually a lot of emerging InsurTech in healthcare. So historically wasn't really called that, but things like enabling deeper understanding of payments, pricing transparency in health insurance, enabling faster claims. Concierge care is a really big one right now. So in long-term care, in, aging parents, in parental, maternal leave. So there's all kinds of really interesting intersections. And this is where I spend all of my time, is at this intersection of InsurTech and healthcare. So it's actually a pretty hot space right now, surprisingly, maybe for some.
Yeah, and so what I also would like you to fact check me on here is, where is the line between what AI, so to speak, is doing in terms of making these decisions about someone's price point, monthly price point when they come in based on the data they share about themselves, and where does a human come in? How does this work? And I know you're all about building community and resources, so I want you to expand upon that a bit, because I think it's, it's hard to think about this in the one context of like, there's the payment plan piece, but there's all these other aspects as well. So I realize that's two questions. We can take them one at a time.
Yeah. Are you meaning for Flora or for insurance in general?
For Flora.
Because they're two different answers. There is quite a bit of AI in underwriting in certain lines of business, but for Flora in particular, how we're doing it at the outset is there's a very specific predefined underwriting model. So for, folks in epidemiology or healthcare, it's really like truly a predictive model. So, I've spent my career in building models and in understanding women's health and fertility. And so because there's never been a product like this before, there's no insurance data. So what we did was go to the academic literature, private and publicly available data sets around infertility and fertility treatment and build this model. And so it's based on age, and lifestyle factors and medical information. And there's no AI decision making at this point. There, it is all built on this model that then transitions into the actuarial or the pricing model. And that being said, so some people will go straight through the model and they'll answer their questions and they'll get a policy quickly. If there are medical issues, for example, then they will talk to a person. So we have an amazing team of medical underwriters, and they will talk to that person and dig a bit deeper and potentially look at medical records to make those decisions. AI, at least initially for us, is going to be used to improve our risk model, better understand what's driving claims, but also really help women understand what are the factors individually for them that are driving their risk, and be able to provide some lifestyle recommendations to help mitigate the risk of infertility. So that's what I'm really excited about in terms of AI. And will we potentially use it to improve our models? Absolutely. Will it ever be a completely AI model doing our underwriting? I don't think so. I don't see that happening.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because that's an interesting idea, that you want to help people optimize their fertility along the way. So you've got these people joining young before they know whether they're going to be the 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 people that have a fertility struggle. And meanwhile, we're trying to optimize their fertility so that they maybe can avoid some of those challenges down the road. And I think that's where your interest in wearables and all of that kind of interfaces. And when I saw that that's what you do, I was like super excited to talk to you, because I mean, not only I wear my Apple Watch every day, and I'm like, I've simmered down a little bit about it, but I also, do you know what Morpheus is?
Yes.
I am obsessed with my Morpheus. Like, it's every single morning I check my Morpheus data. I record all my workouts and all that stuff, and make decisions about what my workout's going to look like, how much recovery I'm going to include, all of that stuff. And I obviously think about my sleep and nutrition and all that as it pertains to that. So I love these things, because I do see their utility if you can kind of find moderation and not be obsessed. But I haven't necessarily, it's like I have two totally different interests around pregnancy and women's health, but the wearables has never factored into my loves and passions around that. So I'm like, oh, please teach me, show me the way, and tell me what things healthcare consumers and healthcare providers, just open the door for us. I know we don't have all day, but open the door for us a little bit. Give us a peek into where the data is really interesting and what we can learn and how we can optimize, be it our fertility or our pregnancies or whatever else.
Ooh, I love this question. I mean, yes, I could go on for days about. I think where to start. So as I mentioned, I mean, my first study ever was on high-risk pregnant women. And the reason that we did that study was to understand, what's happening to women who are bed rested. Does, laying down all day have any impact on your other health outcomes? We also looked at tracked their nutrition. And in a nutshell, what we found was, of course it does. If you're taking 200, less than 1,000 steps a day, it's messing with your glucose levels. It's messing with, all kinds of systems. So for me, that was the genesis of really my whole career in this space, of understanding for me, it's mostly physical activity. How does physical activity in particular drive health outcomes? And the real aha moment for me was during my postdoc at the University of Michigan, where we were finding that accelerometry data was massively predictive of all kinds of things: surgical outcomes, responsiveness to treatment, all kinds of things. And so my master's having been in exercise and pregnancy, actually, we'll have to chat more about this some other time.
Yes.
physical activity in particular is a massive driver of, as I'm sure people know, chronic disease and mortality. And for pregnancy and infertility, it's no different. So the models that we've built show that things like steps per day, minutes of moderate to vigorous activity can have a significant impact on infertility risk. And similarly, other things that you can collect with wearable devices, things like blood glucose. So with all the CGM, the continuous blood glucose
fan of
monitoring.
CGMs also.
Yeah. Well, you would love. I'm advising this company right now called MedWatch, and they're bringing out a non-invasive CGM, so no needle, and so blood glucose, nutrition, huge driver of, both success in fertility journeys, but also in mitigating risk for infertility, as are things like stress. So, and stress is a tricky one because, there's a lot of emerging opportunities in heart rate variability, so HRV, and sleep tracking around being able to map cortisol levels and stress. The tricky one with infertility and stress is, as a woman having gone through infertility and having everyone say, just calm down, you need to reduce your stress. The less stressed you are, the lower the risk. So, we're trying to think through, are there ways to help women just understand that and maybe make some small lifestyle changes that could impact. So I don't know if that answered your question, but there's so many different pieces of data that are now coming from wearables that we didn't have before that can help women understand their general health, risk for infertility, but also help them guide their exercise and health routines during pregnancy. And last thing I'll say, a lot of the stuff that I was doing, this was like pre-Apple Watch, right? Like I did a research study with the Gen 1 Apple Watch. Apple actually donated a bunch of watches. I had started a lab at Stanford called the Wearable Health Lab, and we were doing mostly low back pain research, and they gave us a bunch of Gen 1 Apple Watches, and we did a very cool study with those. But people kind of forget they haven't been around for that long, right? It's about 10 years. Prior to that, we didn't have really any way to look at all these things. So the technology has just gone from nascent to holy moly, all the things we can track now. It's super exciting.
Hey everyone, it's me, Tanya, your host here at the MotherWit podcast. You know I sometimes invite my clients on the show to talk about their birth stories and postpartum experiences, but I want to tell you a little bit more about what those clients and I actually do together. I started MotherWit to help people in the perinatal period achieve their health and wellness goals. That means whether you're hoping to conceive and struggling with high blood pressure or high blood sugar, or you're having trouble managing anxiety or depression in the postpartum period, or maybe you just need support and advocacy between prenatal or postpartum visits, I can help. Get a discount on your first consultation with me at motherwitmaternity.com using the code FIRSTCONSULT 10% off. That's 10% symbol, all one word. I'm looking forward to working with you and maybe having you on the show too.
We hope you're enjoying the MotherWit podcast. If you are, please rate us and leave a review in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to your podcast. Thanks so much. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, it is. And even listening to you answer the question, I instantly realized, I do all of this stuff all the time with people one-on-one. I work with people wearing CGMs to, for that piece of the puzzle when it comes to fertility, obviously pregnancy, even postpartum. And we're always talking about sleep. We're always talking about nutrition. Physical activity is my jam. Of course, we're doing all of these things. We don't always need a device to work on those things. Of course, not everybody's into it. And I do think that there's a subset of the population for whom these devices will stress them out. I think I'm kind of the perfect personality for it because I don't get totally obsessed, but I just love using myself as a, data set of one.
Yeah.
and
it's the N of one study. When you were talking, I was like, you're that N of one study. And I think, There's another term for it that's on like the edge of my brain right now, but that when people were first starting to really get into this biological tracking and all the biofeedback loops and stuff. And anyways, I find it fascinating.
It is. It's endlessly fascinating. And I think that there's so much utility. I can't wait to see where this goes. I'm enjoying seeing where it is in the current moment, let alone where it's going. And I know it's going to great places. This is really fascinating. So I guess tying it back into Flora, how does this tie back into Flora actually?
Yeah, great question. So because our IP in Flora, our intellectual property, is very heavily on the modeling side. So our underwriting and risk selection models. And although age is a very strong driver of pricing in those models, lifestyle factors are as well. So we're asking about smoking, alcohol, drugs, but we're also asking about physical activity, nutrition, stress, and what the plan is, not for Gen 1. So when we're launching in the spring, we will not be initially collecting wearable data, but that will be in, the next iteration where we'll be asking women, if you're interested in connecting your wearable device, we could potentially get you better pricing, A, right? And B, and that's what my previous company was, by the way. We were doing this exact model, but for life insurance. So helping life insurers better understand mortality. In this case, we're doing it for fertility. But also the reason we want to collect that wearable data is this lifestyle coaching piece. So helping women better understand small but meaningful changes. And given your background, super impressive background, you would understand that a lot of people don't realize how small in terms of lifestyle changes you need to make to have meaningful impact. So things like, can you take 500 more steps a day? You don't have to be crushing out a 2-hour treadmill run to have an impact on your health risks. So being able to make these recommendations and help women better understand their health and their risk is a big piece of bringing in that wearable data and being able to provide value back to our customers.
Awesome. I think this is super cool. And actually, that reminds me of, I'm not sure if you'll appreciate the comparison. You will see. My mom, for her car insurance, has this little device in her car. You know what I'm going to say already?
Metro Mile. Yeah.
Yeah. And so every time I drive her car, she's like, don't speed. You're going to mess up my price.
It's so funny.
It is, but I'm like, oh, whoa, this has like really broad application. Like I hadn't realized this. And obviously it sounds like for the people who would connect it, they would connect it because they believe that they're going to show good things, right? But I'm assuming that there can be a downside as well. I'm thinking about like, somebody who hasn't really processed, maybe if they have some sleep apnea going on. I don't know how far you're going into this, but there's things that could pop up that I guess could go the other way, right?
Yes, potentially in the long term. But the interesting thing, and again, apologies to your listeners for getting in the insurance weeds here, but in order to actually what's called decline a policy or take people in that negative direction where you're charging them more for something, there are certain regulatory steps you have to go through.
Okay, cool.
And so that's a big part of the reason that you're not seeing a lot of this happen in the life insurance space yet. And it would be the same in fertility. So in most cases, at least in the relatively near future, the wearable data would only be positive for you, right? So it would be if your physical activities are such that you have a very low risk, we would give you better pricing, but not in the opposite direction, which is great. But from a pricing perspective, eventually it could go the other direction. And to your point around monitoring in cars, it's wild to me that we've figured out a way to monitor driving behavior and have it impact pricing and not the same for health behaviors. So, for example, steps per day is a stronger predictor of mortality than smoking. People hear that and they're like, no way, but it is. You understand physical activity, you would get that right away. And so I think we're entering a world where health behaviors like activity and sleep and stress that are in our control, they're modifiable behaviors, they do have an impact on risk. And so it's just it's interesting conceptually how that will get applied.
Yeah, and what I like about the current state of things, assuming that we don't have to deal with the negative impacting pricing, is it serves only to incentivize you to do more or do better.
100%. Like, you nailed it. It's one of the only instances in life and business, really, where incentives are aligned, right? You have us as Flora really wanting, from a consumer perspective, to help you better understand your health, to reduce your risk of needing to make a claim, which on the business side is positive. The fewer claims you make, the better the business does. So it's all very circular in terms of truly our product is, women coming together to fund one another's risk, where your health behaviors do have a material impact on that from your health side, but also from the financial side.
Cool. Well, my last question for you then is, and this might be getting too far ahead since you haven't exactly launched yet, you're very close to that, but, what do you see for the future in terms of like expanding coverage when it comes to things like postpartum and pelvic floor and perimenopause and all of this stuff? Like, where are you at in your thinking about this? And would that be separate policies, so to speak, or upcharges for these different pieces? Like, what do you envision?
I love that question. First of all, given, the dearth of solutions for all of the things that you mentioned, being a woman in perimenopause myself, looking for solutions, absolutely, these things are on our roadmap. So, the blue sky for Flora is that we're able to provide a community and also financial protection for women needing treatment throughout their lifespan. So pre-fertility, going through pregnancy, postpartum, for me, having had 3 kids, the accessibility of anything postpartum, there's basically nothing there. Things like pelvic floor therapy, postnatal depression. I can tell you as a perimenopausal woman, there's very little there. And same with menopause. So we would love to be able to provide solutions. What exactly those look like, we're not 100% sure right now, but it would likely be a similar form of some kind of community-based insurance, where if you need treatments, then we're there to cover them. And also just bringing to light and normalizing conversations around these things in women's health. Miscarriage is another big one. Personally, I had a bunch of miscarriages, and similarly, no one talks about it and there's very little support. So are there solutions that we can bring there, alongside all those other things? Would be really the vision.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I gotta say, I love meeting women who are doing really innovative things in this space and willing to talk about all the things. So I thank you for your openness and sharing all this information, because I do believe that, the majority of my listeners are Gen Z, maybe, just a touch older sometimes, but this is right up their alley. And I sometimes, when we talk about fertility and IVF, I recognize that I'm talking sometimes to people who are listening going, that's all great and fine, I don't know how I could possibly afford this. So I've had that thought, and to know that something's coming down the pike that is affordable is really exciting. And I'm really going to be watching to see where this goes. I'm so thrilled to have had you and met you.
Well, thank you. And same to you. I mean, you're a great host, first of all. And I will say to your listeners, if they are primarily Gen Z, like, this generation is different. you know, but I'm aging myself here, but I'm Gen X, and you know, we didn't talk about these things. And now women are talking about it. You know, my daughters are a bit young, but they're talking about it. They knew mom went through fertility challenges. They know what IVF is. They have friends that have been born through IVF. And so I think that just the openness to talk about women's health and these real issues, there's a big sea change. And from a market perspective, that's what we've seen is young women are thinking about this. They're talking about it. They're open about it. They're looking for solutions. And so that's where we're really excited to be there for them from the financial standpoint, but also community. And our new branding, which is coming out shortly, new website and everything, is really leaning into this plus motherhood concept of, you know, be all the things you want to be, travel, have a career, and then be a mom if you want to be a mom, like when and if you're ready to. So really excited about all that's coming out.
Yeah, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Do you need to give out any details about how people can find you and I don't know if you're on the gram and all the other places?
Yes. So our website, if you want to join the wait list, is heyflora.co. You can go there, and as mentioned, we're releasing a new website shortly. And then we're Hey Flora Health on Instagram, and then we're not on TikTok yet, but we're getting there. We have an amazing social media person working with us to get that off the ground.
All right. Well, I will make sure to put those in the show notes so people can find them. If there's anything else you want to add, I will happily put it there so people can find you.
Nothing else from a social perspective. I think those are it, other than,
Perfect.
You know, watch for launch. I mean, we're launching sometime in the spring. We'll be keeping our eye open.
Yeah. I'll remind everybody.
Yay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the MotherWhip podcast. If any of the issues we discussed today resonate with you or your experience, I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a voicemail at 917-310-0573, or better yet, email me a voice memo at tanya@motherwhipmaternity.com. I really want to hear what worked for you, what didn't work, what support you'd wished you had, how you got through the tough times, how you advocated for yourself, or especially any tips you want to share with our listeners. I want to hear all of it. And if you'd really like to work together, you can get a discount on your first consultation with me at motherwhipmaternity.com using the code FIRSTCONSULT 10% off. That's 10% symbol, all one word. Okay, that's all. It's wonderful being in community with you all. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.
And remember, listeners, nothing we discuss on this show should ever be considered medical advice. Please speak to your local provider about anything that comes up in this show that resonates with you and your needs and your healthcare.